Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 196 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I am your host, Mike Ayalon. I am the CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and two-time author. Our second book, From Letters to Leaders, Redefining New Member Education and Leveraging Belonging to Eliminate Hazing, is available right now, so you can pick up that book on Amazon. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, it has been truly the honor of a lifetime this year to write 2 books, but none of that would be possible without the help of all the speakers at Greek University. So today's episode of the podcast is going to be dedicated to all the speakers at Greek University who took on this mission of writing during the pandemic to remain productive despite not being able to get together with other people, and to help educate all of our college students, all of our fans, and make college campuses safer. So thank you to everybody for what you do. Today on our show, we have with us author Rico Lamoureux. He believes that variety is the spice of life. His storytelling knows no boundaries as he goes from children's picture books to crime thrillers, historical fiction to horror, each tale with its own unique voice. For Rico, great storytelling is not about genre, but instead the actual story itself. Legally blind in one eye and totally blind in the other, Rico and his son Journey Teller are currently working towards reuniting their small family, as Journey's mama and their mini pin, Giacomo, are half a world away. I can't wait to share this story with our listeners because I found it to be so interesting. Welcome to the show, Rico.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
That's great. It is an honor to meet you. It is an honor to talk to you a little bit more. I mean, what an interesting story that you have, and I want to help in any way that I can. So to tell our listeners a little bit more about what happened to you, you're a US born citizen who has lived in the Philippines for the last 18 years. And there were some really tight COVID restrictions there in the Philippines, including a government issued shoot to kill order of anybody who was protesting these lockdowns. So is that the reason why you decided to move back to the United States with your son?
Yes, it was. My wife and I were talking over before COVID, and about me bringing him home because things just weren't getting better over there. It's the lack of opportunity is really the complete opposite of our fortunate land of opportunity over here. And so we would always talk about it, but it was when we would get closer to making a decision, it was just too hard to separate, But then once COVID hit, yes, things went from bad to worse, and it became so strict we couldn't even leave our homes without at weeks at a time, and we didn't know if we were going to go hungry. And military were patrolling the streets, and when they finally worked stuff out after a month or so, one person per household can leave the home once a week for some food. So even when they started to figure things out, it was still very strict. And so we worked with the embassy, and we made the very difficult decision for me to bring our baby home. And it was extremely difficult, yes.
Wow. And so your Filipino wife, she lacks US citizenship. She doesn't have that like you do, which means that she cannot come to the United States yet. So how hard was it to leave her behind in the Philippines?
Probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, we were all in tears, and it was just extremely difficult. I was over there for 18 and a half years because I could not get the visa for her, because you have to meet the income requirement to bring a spouse to the US. And so I just refused to leave her because, I was dedicated. I'm always dedicated to my marriage, but yes, I was so dedicated to my marriage that I just couldn't leave her because I didn't know when I could bring her home. Because, basically it meant coming back to the US and starting all over again. And that's what we've done with me and my son. But that's why I was over there for so long, because, we've been together for so long. And actually next year, July, is our 20th wedding anniversary. And it would be so wonderful to have her home before then. But, even though the odds are stacked against us, I'm fighting really hard. But yeah, to answer your question, it was one of the most hardest things in the world to leave her behind.
I can't even imagine going through that. I mean, my wife and I We've been together now for 19 years, and we're also going on our 20th wedding anniversary as well. I can't even imagine going through something like that. That's just awful. And you also face this extra challenge because, like I said in the intro, you're completely blind in one eye, you're legally blind in the other. So being on disability has made it very difficult for you to earn enough money to get your wife the visa that she needs. So is there any other solutions out there that would help to reunite your family?
Well, yeah, I've researched this for almost 20 years now, and there's no getting around it really. The government is really strict about this, the US government. So, and to some point, it's understandable. They don't want financial burden on them by bringing so many people over. But we're talking about just one person, a spouse, and so, but basically, the only other two options, one would be finding a joint petitioner. And that is basically someone who's willing to sign and be responsible for the person coming into the US, so that if they do incur some medical bills or anything else, that person would be responsible if for some reason I could not handle it. And nowadays people are just not willing to do that. And of course, again, I can understand to a certain extent, but that's why the lawyers always say turn to a family member or a close friend. Well, I don't come from a close family, unfortunately, and I don't really have friends, lifelong friends, because I was over there for almost 20 years. I went there in my youth with jet black hair, and from the stress of being in a third world country, I came back with all white hair. But yeah, so that's the second option. And the third option would be a work visa. And the thing is, it's really hard to get a work visa. In most cases, you need to hold a high degree, like a master's or above. And my wife doesn't have any college degree. So that is really difficult. So the only slight option with that way is that if we were to find her a job where it's in very high demand and the US Americans are not really filling it. And so for example, I did my research and I know Amazon is like the #1 that does offer these work visas, and so does Walmart. They're on the top. But then upon more research, I found out that they're using this H-1B to actually outsource and hire people, even though they're foreigners. I think they're keeping them in the foreign countries and hire them like for answering phones and so forth. So, but I've been trying, but it's really hard to get into Amazon headquarters on the phone, or even Walmart, and investigate this more and see if they would be willing to. And then a couple of months ago, I actually found out about an hour away there's a meat processing plant that does hire immigrants. And so I called them up and they said, yeah, we do this through an agency in Atlanta. And so they gave me the number, I contacted them, and the thing is, the person who is applying has to pay $16,000 for this immigrant visa. So I would have to come up with $16,000 to be able to get this visa so my wife can come on this particular visa so she could work at this meat plant. And again, they basically do these jobs where, again, it's hard to find Americans to fulfill all these jobs. So I don't know how these immigrants are coming up with that. I guess they have life savings or something, but unfortunately my wife comes from poverty as well, and like real poverty. Her home when she grew up in, it's like a dirt floor and so forth, and just like a tin roof and everything. It's like kind of like a barn, really. And so yeah, it's just really tough, and those are the only options to really bring her home. And so I know I have a monumentous task ahead of me, but I've always been a determined person, and I've been a passionate storyteller all my life. So this is really the only thing that I'm great at, and so I'm using it to try to use my passion to get her home.
Yeah. Wow. What a story. Well, if any of our listeners know anybody at Amazon or at Walmart that might be able to help, maybe that's a possible solution if they can connect you with somebody at either of those two companies to see what could be done to bring her over, get her a job on a visa. I think maybe that's something we can look into and try to help as best we can. And at the end of the interview, we'll give your website and your contact information. So that way, if any of our listeners have any ideas on how you can reunite your family here in the United States, that they'll reach out to you. And I hope and pray that that will happen. Now, you're also the author of numerous literary works. You're the founder of Versatile Storyteller Books. So let's talk a little bit about fiction, because For me, I love all the nonfiction books. I'm obsessed with them. Anything that's going to help my company grow, anything that's going to help me grow. I love the nonfiction stuff. But you believe that reading fiction will actually help us to solve our problems. So how is that? How is reading fiction? How will that help us solve problems?
Well, fiction can really open our minds, can broaden our minds. There's not a lot of different mediums that can do this, put us in the perspective of someone else, like, a different gender, a different race, a different profession, a different age. And that helps us relate more with people, and not only this, but it also increases our empathy, our compassion, and so forth. It really increases our emotional intelligence. And yeah, there's even been studies to show this. And yeah, it's really truly helped me in my personal life. For example, I survived a childhood of abuse and poverty thanks to fiction. When no matter the things that were going on around me, not only was I able to escape, but I learned all these important, moral values that most humans have that I was not getting in my family environment. So I learned empathy, I learned motivation, I learned drive. I learned so many things through fiction, through the films and books. And then later on in life, when I faced these physical hardships, again, it got me through it. And, another great lesson that I learned is perseverance, and through these like goal-oriented stories where these characters have to persevere. And another thing is critical thinking. It helps you with critical thinking, and it helps you, of course, obviously with creativity. There's just so much we can get from fiction. It's so much more than entertainment.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you said that, because even for somebody like me, I learn something new every day. And our last episode number 195, was all about emotional intelligence. And this was the exact case that she was making, that if you read more fiction, you will increase your emotional intelligence. So such an important thing for you to say, and I hope that our listeners will pay attention to that. Often college students today, they have to write on a regular basis, especially as you get into master's degree programs, PhD, all of that other stuff. So what are some ways for college students to find inspiration and to never have writer's block again?
Okay, so yeah, obviously I'm coming more from a fictional perspective, but it can also help with nonfiction writing. So I like to say it's all about mindset. The first thing is the realization that there are countless stories around us and countless ways to tell each. Like, we come across countless people every day. The places we visit, the settings, even the things around us, every single thing can have a story to it, every single thing. And so in that sense, there are truly countless ways in which to tell a story. And another thing is, you see, I studied the ancient martial art back in the 90s, and a lot of it was philosophy as well. And so I also incorporate this into my writing, because it's as far as life, it considers that as well. And that is, anything in this universe can be the missing piece to our personal puzzle. And this goes for writing as well. So no matter how mundane it is, it could be the one thing that sets out the light bulb in our head. Can't tell you how many times I've been, either waiting in a grocery line, doing the dishes, going for a walk, anything you just have to be open to the possibilities. And so anything could be the one thing that you need, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. Because another thing I believe very strongly is, any kind of writing is storytelling, any kind, whether it's copywriting for marketing, whether it's some paper you have to do for your professor, whether it's fiction, anything, everything is storytelling. So you want to keep that reader engaged, right? That is the number one priority when you write, is keeping the reader engaged. And so keeping that mindset, and also knowing that just be open to everything, because you never know what your personal piece of the puzzle is going to be.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think that's true for public speakers as well. If you want to be a great public speaker, you have to keep your audience entertained, and it's all about good storytelling. And how do you be a good storyteller? You got to read. You got to read a lot in order to be a good storyteller.
And also, one other thing I would say is by getting inspired. This may sound obvious, but yeah, sometimes you just need some great inspiration, like a great film, a great book, maybe some great music. But I also want, the more we go along with the internet and everything, it's, saturated, right? The market is saturated. So we want to make sure we get a hold of great storytelling storytelling, that we're absorbing great storytelling, because there's a lot of superficial stuff out there, right? So I would just encourage people to try to make sure you're absorbing yourself, your heart, your soul, your brain with some great storytelling, because when you absorb that, it's going to come back through your work.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Talk to us a little bit more about the different genres of books that college students are usually reading. I mean, do you have any data that supports, how many are reading nonfiction versus fiction and other things?
Yeah. So I know with Generation Z, for one thing, they have increased their reading habits more than any other group since the pandemic. So yeah, and like, for example, fantasy is very big with Gen Z, and that's over 50%. And then also YA. But then we have the other genres as well that's really high on the list, like horror and romance, sci-fi, short stories. And, my latest book is a short story collection. And yeah, so they're really multi-genre readers, just like I'm a multi-genre writer. So that's really good from an author standpoint, that I learned that Gen Z is into all these different genres, because that makes me feel good, because yeah, I'm the kind of author that I don't feel comfortable just writing in one genre, because it's kind of like, when we watch movies, we don't watch the same type of movie over and over, right? Sometimes we're in the mood for a great comedy, sometimes an action-packed thriller or something, sometimes a powerful, tear-jerking, dramatic film, and so on. And my approach is the same way with books. And even though I can't see well, so I can't read as well as I used to, that's why Audible is my candy store nowadays. And so I still take in a ton of books, because this time nowadays I'm listening to them. But yeah, I just come from the perspective that multi-genre really is the spice of life. Variety is the spice of life.
Yeah, thank goodness for Audible, because now it makes it accessible to anybody. So that's really fantastic. And you're right, I have two Gen Z kids, and for them, fantasy, that's like what they're all about. So I see that all the time with my kids as well. So that definitely resonates. So which of your books in particular do you think would be the most interesting for our college student listeners? Are there any particular books that you really think that they would love?
Well, I don't want to be stereotypical. So I know that females can be just as interested in crime thrillers as males. So yeah, I have a crime thriller up there, and it's actually the first book in what's going to be a series. It's the Jeremy Riker series. And so that's pretty intense. And then I also have a historical romance book that takes place in France. It's called The Maiden of Monaco. And I write in novellas and short stories 99% of the time. So, because I believe that you don't need hundreds and hundreds of pages to tell a complete and engaging story. And so that's just my approach personally. And so, yeah, I also have a horror book up there called The Marriage Staircase. And it's about an urban legend of these mirrors coming together. And so these group of college students set out to see if the urban legend is true or not. And that's a pretty intense story as well. So yeah, I have all these different genres, and I also happen to have my autobiography up there. So if anyone is interested more in what I've went through my life and the diversity I've faced, it's also up there. It's called Power of the Pen. And the reason it's called Power of the Pen is not because it's all about writing. No, it's actually very diverse, and it chronicles my life. But the reason it's called Power of the Pen is because all these different life experiences led me to the ultimate realization that I was meant to be a writer. And so all that gathered to the power of the pen. I'm able to now to be in alignment with truth, with all these stories I'm telling, because a lot of what you experience in life, that can make your writing so much richer.
Mm-hmm. Wow, the amount of adversity that you've gone through in your life, man, you could definitely write a book about everything that you've been through. And I think all of us can learn something from this journey that you've been through in terms of perseverance, in terms of so many different things. So I'm so glad that you're sharing all of that. Talk to us a little bit about how your life has been for you and your son living in South Dakota now after spending 18 and a half years in the Philippines.
Even though I'm a born and raised American, it is a culture shock to come back. But yeah, I kissed the ground as soon as I got off that plane. I was because, I mean, most of us are proud Americans, true. And I've always been patriotic, but man, when you experience life in a third world country, you truly, truly understand how fortunate we are to be Americans. And so it's bittersweet because I was so grateful to be back home, but at the same time, I'm hurting so much because my wife is not with us. But yeah, we settled in South Dakota. I have never been here before, but we settled for the number one reason is because we went from this other end of the spectrum of extreme lockdowns. So my wife and I wanted to settle in a place where there is no lockdowns, okay? And South Dakota is among the few that's no lockdowns, because, in the other states, you have some businesses having to shut down and so forth. And, I don't want to I don't mean to get too much into that, but I just think that when people's livelihoods are taken away, that's something to be concerned about. And so that's why we chose South Dakota, number one. And another reason is I do love the snow. I especially in the Philippines, it's very hot, but we found a mountainous city over there called Baguio City. And that's where we stayed for the 18 and a half years, because that's more like the US weather, because every other area in the Philippines is very humid. But it's really hard for me to deal with the heat, whether it's, dry heat or humid heat. And so, and it's very peaceful over here and quiet. And I really enjoy that. And this is one of the least populated states in the country. And another thing is, it's one of the least expensive states in the country. So this is another strategy is why I chose here, so that we can, when we're rebuilding our lives, it's helping us financially because this is one of the least expensive states here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I went to the school at the University at Buffalo, in Buffalo, New York. We get plenty of snow over there as well. But after 4 years of that, I decided I need to move south. I needed some warm weather too. So I ended up moving to the south in Tennessee. But South Dakota is a beautiful place. You can't take anything away from it. The nature is fantastic. The weather is great. And just like you said, very cheap to live. So that's a nice bonus as well. Now, we love good food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast, and I'm sure that you're starting to see some favorite foods develop with your son. So I'm curious, is there a particular meal that you two love to have there in South Dakota?
Well, yeah, it was so great to come back and eat American food. For example, I went years without milk because, they're depending on where you are in the world, they're going to have different versions of milk. And so, over here we have whole milk, we have 2%, right? It's very common. And so I'm a 2% drinker, but I mean, if I only had whole milk, that's fine as well. But yeah, over there, I didn't have milk because I didn't like that kind. I'm kind of picky, my palate's kind of picky. So for years and years, I didn't even have a bowl of cereal. And I treasured it when I got here. But yeah, my son, he really loves bread like I do. And so, everything from garlic bread to chicken pot pies to, what else? French bread, so many different breads. So, and he's getting to the point now where he demands it. If we have dinner without bread, he will not eat the dinner. and so, yeah. I used to make calzones. It takes a lot of work because I used to make them homemade. At some point when he gets older, I would like to make some for him. And maybe at that stage, he could help me because it is a lot of work when you're making the homemade dough and everything, but they turn out to be very delicious. And since we're both fans of bread and then have some really great filling inside, yeah, I'm looking forward to making some calzones for him.
Yeah. That sounds absolutely wonderful. I mean, if you want great bread, go to New York at some point and you can have some of the best bread that you'll ever taste in the world. It's just fantastic with all the bagels. For me, I love pizza. So, that the crust on that is just absolutely delicious. And I don't know how you went, 18 and a half years without eating cereal with a bowl of milk. I mean, that is just the best. And so I can imagine.
I know, yeah, it was really tough, Yeah, I went. That was the first aisle I hit when we came back, the cereal aisle. Everything from Fruity Pebbles to Frosted Flakes to everything you could think of.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that was a lot of fun for you to have those after so many years. Makes you feel like a kid again.
Yes, and the thing is, though, the one thing is I was kind of disappointed in is that they don't put toys in the kids' boxes. I mean, in the cereal boxes anymore.
It's all about saving money. They're trying to save
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. All right. So if our listeners, maybe they want to purchase your books, maybe they want to contact you for some more information about the situation that you're in with your family, and maybe they can help with that, maybe by contacting somebody at Amazon or at Walmart to help with the job, where should they go to connect with you?
Okay, so yeah, my website is versatilestorytellerbooks.com or versatilestoryteller.com, same website. And I also am on Twitter at Rico Lamoureux, and I have a Facebook page for Versatile Storyteller Books.
That's fantastic. This has been so much fun, Rico. I really enjoyed it. And your story about your family with your son and your wife who's back in the Philippines. I mean, we want to do everything we can to help reunite the three of you. I mean, nothing would make me happier than to see a photograph of your whole family together, in South Dakota. And if this podcast can help in terms of making that happen, I will be the happiest man on the face of the earth. So that would make me very, very happy. So if any of our listeners can assist, please help out Rico. His son is super adorable, and I want to see something good happen for the holidays. And maybe you can spend your 20th anniversary together. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing?
That would be so wonderful. And thank you so much for your well wishes. It means so very much to us.
Of course. Well, Rico, take care. And to all of our listeners, if you enjoyed Rico's talk about his books and his family, please like it and share it with other students, share it with other people that might be able to help him reunite his family here in South Dakota. And we hope to see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie. Thanks so much. Bye for now.